Captain Jake Morrison floated in his broken escape pod as darkness filled the space around him. 3 days had passed since the HFY warships destroyed his research vessel Aurora's End. The attack came without warning during what was supposed to be humanity's first peaceful meeting with alien species in the Andromeda sector. Jake watched helplessly as his crew died and his ship burned. Now he drifted alone with failing life support and no hope of rescue. The pod's computer showed him the bad news in cold numbers. Oxygen would last maybe 6 more hours. The emergency beacon was damaged beyond repair. No human ships would come this far into unknown space to look for one man. Jake accepted his fate with the calm that came from years of space service. At least he would die among the stars he loved. That was when strange ships appeared on his sensors. The vessels looked nothing like human designs. They were curved and graceful like bird wings made of metal and crystal. The largest ship approached his pod carefully, as if afraid to frighten him. Jake had never seen anything so beautiful in space. Even as his vision blurred from lack of oxygen, he watched the alien ship extend what looked like gentle arms to pull his pod inside. The next thing Jake knew, he was lying on a soft surface breathing clean air. Tall figures with feathers covering their bodies stood around him. They had large eyes that seemed to glow with kindness. One of them made soft musical sounds that might have been speech. Jake tried to speak, but his throat was too dry. The being nearest to him offered water in a container that looked like it was grown rather than made. Over the following days, Jake slowly recovered his strength. The aliens who saved him were called the Veltar. They were refugees like him, but for different reasons. Their leader was an elderly female named Elder Wingsong Cathara. Through broken translation attempts, she told Jake that the same HFY empire that destroyed his ship had taken their homeworld 6 months ago. The Veltar fleet consisted of civilian ships that were never meant for long journeys through space. They carried the last survivors of their people as they ran from system to system trying to stay ahead of HFY hunter fleets. Jake learned that they had saved him not because they expected anything in return, but simply because they believed all thinking beings deserve to live. Flight Singer Zarathek was the young Veltar who commanded the scout ship that found Jake. She worked patiently with him each day to improve communication between their species. Jake discovered that the Veltar had amazing knowledge about space navigation and peaceful ways of living that humans had never imagined. They were not warriors, but they were incredibly wise. The Veltar fleet moved constantly to avoid detection. Their ships were old and barely held together, but they flew with grace through dangerous asteroid fields and past unstable stars. Jake watched the refugee families care for their young and tend to their elderly with a gentleness that reminded him why life was worth saving. These people had lost everything, but they had not lost their kindness. Elder Wingsong Cathara spent many hours with Jake learning about human culture. She was fascinated by stories of Earth and humanity's own struggles to survive and grow. Jake told her about wars that taught humans to value peace and disasters that taught them to help each other. The elder listened with the same attention she gave to ancient Veltar wisdom songs. Jake began to understand that the Veltar were not just running from the HFY. They were carrying something precious that the galaxy needed to survive. Their culture contained thousands of years of knowledge about living in harmony with others and with the universe itself. If the HFY destroyed them, this wisdom would be lost forever. The refugee fleet had been traveling for months without rest. Their supplies were running low, and their ships needed repairs they could not afford to make. Jake saw the exhaustion in their eyes even as they continued to care for him with patience and love. These people were dying slowly, but they would not give up hope. 3 weeks after his rescue, Jake's emergency beacon suddenly came to life. The signal reached a human patrol ship called the USS Defender. Commander Lisa Parker contacted Jake and told him they were coming to get him. But there was a problem. The patrol ship could only take Jake. There was no room for the Veltar refugees and no time to wait for a larger rescue mission. Jake faced the hardest choice of his life. He could go home to safety and leave the Veltar to face the HFY alone. Or he could stay with the people who saved him and probably die with them when the hunters finally caught up. The choice was not really a choice at all. Jake had seen what the Veltar were capable of when they had nothing to gain. Now, It was his turn. When Commander Lisa Parker arrived, Jake gave her a message to take back to Earth. He told her about the Veltar and their amazing culture. He explained how they had saved him when they had every reason to leave him to die. Most importantly, he asked humanity to come back for all of them. The Veltar had shown him what it meant to be truly civilized. Now humans had a chance to prove they could be civilized too. The USS Defender left with Jake's message, but without Jake. He watched the ship disappear into jump space and felt no regret. Flight singer Zarathek stood beside him on the observation deck of her ship. Through their improved translation system, she asked him why he chose to stay. Jake smiled and told her that humans had a saying about leaving no one behind. Today he learned that some ideas were bigger than just one species. Elder Wingsong Kithara welcomed Jake as a permanent member of their community. She gave him a new name in the Veltar language that meant friend from the stars. Jake began working with their engineers to improve their ships using salvaged parts from his escape pod. It was not much, but every small improvement might help them survive a little longer. The Kethvar were still out there hunting. The Veltar were still running and hiding, but now they had something they never had before. They had a human who believed in them and a message traveling toward Earth that might change everything. Jake Morrison had been saved by aliens who owed him nothing. Soon the galaxy would learn what humans did when someone showed them such kindness. Commander Lisa Parker arrived at Terra Command with Jake Morrison's message burning in her mind. She had traveled 3 weeks through jump space thinking about the strange story he told her. When she delivered his recording to Admiral Samuel Hayes, the entire command center fell silent. Jake's words about the Veltar and their selfless rescue echoed through the halls of military headquarters. Admiral Hayes played the message for President Karen Wells and the Earth Defense Council. The leaders listened as Jake described people who saved him when they had nothing to gain and everything to lose. He told them about refugees fleeing genocide while still maintaining their principles of kindness and wisdom. Most importantly, he asked humanity to prove they were worthy of the trust the Veltar had shown him. The story spread through human space faster than any news in history. Within hours, every communication network carried Jake's message. People gathered in public spaces to watch the recordings he had sent. They saw images of graceful Veltar ships and heard translation attempts of their beautiful language. The refugee, children with their large innocent eyes, reminded humans of their own children. Dr. Amy Collins was Earth's leading expert on alien biology and culture. She studied every piece of data Jake had transmitted about the Veltar. What she discovered amazed the scientific community. The Veltar were not just another species running from war. They were keepers of ancient knowledge that could benefit every thinking being in the galaxy. The Veltar had spent thousands of years learning how to live in peace with other species and with the universe itself. Their navigation techniques used natural phenomena in ways human science was just beginning to understand. Their approach to medicine treated not just bodies, but entire communities. Their philosophy of kindness, creating ripples across space and time, offered hope for a better future. Dr. Collins realized that the Kethvar were not just conquering territory. They were destroying irreplaceable wisdom that had taken millennia to develop. Every Veltar death meant losing knowledge that could never be recovered. The galaxy was becoming smaller and darker with each refugee ship that fell to the hunters. President Wells called an emergency session of the United Earth Assembly. Representatives from every nation and colony gathered to hear Jake's message and Dr. Collins' analysis. The debate was short and unanimous. Humanity would not stand by while genocide destroyed one of the galaxy's most peaceful and wise civilizations. The Assembly authorized Operation Homecoming with resources that surprised even military planners. Every available ship would join the rescue fleet. Hospital ships would carry medical supplies and temporary housing for refugees. Colony transports would provide long-term homes for survivors. Even civilian cargo vessels volunteered their crews and cargo space for the mission. Admiral Hayes found himself commanding the largest fleet in human history. Over 200 ships prepared to travel farther from Earth than any previous expedition. The crews came from every branch of service and every walk of life. Veterans of the Mars colony wars served alongside fresh academy graduates. Civilian volunteers worked next to career military officers. The preparation took 3 weeks of intense work. Engineers modified cargo holds to house Veltar refugees whose biology was different from humans. Medical teams studied Jake's biological data to prepare treatments for alien physiology. Translators worked around the clock to improve communication protocols between species. Meanwhile, Jake Morrison continued living with the Veltar refugee fleet. His regular transmissions showed humanity what daily life was like among the survivors. He described how Veltar families cared for their young with songs that taught history and wisdom. He showed human audiences the intricate art that decorated refugee ships and the ceremonies that honored their lost homeworld. Jake also worked with Veltar engineers to improve their ancient ships using human technology. Parts salvaged from his escape pod were carefully integrated into their systems. The improvements were small but meaningful. Better sensors gave earlier warning of danger. Improved shields provided a few more minutes of protection. Enhanced communications helped coordinate the fleet's movements. Flight singer Zarathek became Jake's closest friend among the Veltar. She taught him their philosophy of kindness, creating endless ripples through the universe. Every good deed eventually returned as greater good, even if the original giver never saw the result. Jake began to understand that his rescue was not random chance but the result of countless acts of kindness by Veltar ancestors. Elder Wingsong Kethara shared with Jake the deepest secrets of Veltar culture. She showed him star charts that mapped safe passage through dangerous regions of space. She taught him meditation techniques that helped beings find peace even in the darkest times. Most importantly, she helped him understand that true strength came from protecting others rather than conquering them. The refugee fleet continued its desperate flight through space. Their hiding places were running out as Kethvar hunter fleets searched every system. Ships broke down faster than they could be repaired. Supplies dwindled despite careful rationing. The Veltar remained calm and dignified, but Jake could see the fear in their eyes when they thought no one was watching. Dr. Collins transmitted new analysis to Jake almost daily. She had discovered that Veltar biology was perfectly adapted to long space voyages. Their culture had evolved specifically to maintain harmony during the stress of interstellar travel. They were natural explorers and peacekeepers who could help other species learn to coexist. The data also revealed something troubling. The Kethavar were not just aggressive conquerors. They were a hive-minded species that literally could not understand individual choice or cultural diversity. To them, other thinking beings were either useful slaves or obstacles to be eliminated. They would never stop hunting the Veltar because the very existence of such different beings threatened their worldview. Jake realized that even when the human rescue fleet arrived, the danger would not end. The Kethvar Empire controlled hundreds of star systems and commanded vast military resources. Saving the Veltar refugees was just the beginning of a much larger conflict between those who valued diversity and those who demanded conformity. But humanity was coming and they were bringing help. Messages from Admiral Hayes confirmed that other species had heard about the rescue mission. The crystalline Zirtai remembered their own encounters with Kethvar aggression. The aquatic Myrdal had lost colony worlds to the expanding empire. Species across the galaxy were beginning to understand that the Veltar crisis was really everyone's crisis. Jake ended his latest transmission to Earth with words that would be remembered for generations. He told his fellow humans that the Veltar had saved one man when they had nothing to gain. Now humanity had a chance to save them all and prove that kindness was not weakness, but the strongest force in the universe. Admiral Samuel Hayes stood on the bridge of the UES Enterprise as the largest rescue fleet in human history, prepared to jump into the unknown. 237 ships formed up in perfect formation around his flagship. Military vessels bristled with weapons while hospital ships and colony transports carried supplies and temporary homes for thousands of refugees. Every crew member understood they were racing against time to save an entire civilization. The fleet pushed through jump space at dangerous speeds that stressed even the newest ship designs. Admiral Hayes accepted the risks because Jake Morrison's latest messages painted an increasingly desperate picture. The Veltar refugee fleet was running out of hiding places as Kethavar hunter groups searched every system in their path. Each day of delay meant more innocent beings would die. Captain Ryan Bennett commanded the advanced scout squadron racing ahead of the main rescue fleet. His 12 fastest ships jumped from system to system, gathering intelligence on Kethvar positions, and searching for signs of the Veltar refugees. What they found troubled everyone who heard the reports. The Kethvar Empire was larger and more organized than anyone had imagined. Bennett's scouts encountered Kethvar patrol fleets in systems that were supposed to be empty space. The alien warships were sleek and deadly, with weapons that could destroy human vessels in seconds. But the scouts also discovered something important about their enemy. The Kethvar moved in predictable patterns because their hive mind could not adapt quickly to unexpected situations. The first battle between human and Kethvar forces happened when Bennett's squadron stumbled into a hunter fleet pursuing Veltar survivors. The aliens had cornered 3 refugee ships in a dead-end system with no escape routes. Captain Bennett made the decision that would define humanity's role in the galaxy. He ordered his ships to attack immediately, without waiting for reinforcements. The battle was brief and vicious. Kethvar weapons were powerful, but their tactics were rigid and predictable. Human pilots used creativity and individual initiative to outmaneuver the larger alien ships. Bennett's squadron destroyed 2 Kethvar vessels and damaged 3 others, before jumping away with the rescued Veltar ships. It was humanity's first victory against the galaxy's most feared empire. News of the rescue reached Jake Morrison, just as he was helping the main Veltar fleet prepare defensive positions in Chao, an asteroid field. The refugees celebrated with songs of gratitude that brought tears to human eyes. Elder Wingsong Kethara told Jake that his people had proven themselves worthy of Veltar friendship by risking their lives for strangers. But the celebration was short-lived. Long-range sensors detected massive Kethvar formations moving toward their position. The enemy had tracked the refugee fleet's energy signatures despite all attempts at concealment. A force of over 100 warships was approaching with overwhelming firepower and ruthless determination to end the Veltar threat forever. Jake worked frantically with Veltar engineers to prepare their ancient ships for what might be their final battle. He had spent weeks learning about their technology, and now he put that knowledge to desperate use. Mining lasers became improvised weapons. Cargo containers were converted into missile launchers. Shield generators designed for asteroid storms were modified to stop energy weapons. Flight singer Zarathek proved to be a brilliant tactical planner despite her people's peaceful nature. She understood that the Veltar could not win a direct fight against superior numbers and firepower. Instead, she developed plans that used their knowledge of space phenomena and their ship's superior maneuverability to level the battlefield. The asteroid field where they hid became a complex maze of defensive positions and ambush points. Jake taught the Veltar human military concepts like crossfire zones and strategic retreat, while they showed him how to use solar wind patterns and magnetic fields as weapons. Together they created a defensive network that could give even Kethvar hunters pause. Dr. Amy Collins transmitted crucial intelligence about Kethvar biology and psychology that helped plan the defense. The aliens were insectoid creatures with a strict hierarchy controlled by queen minds that coordinated their actions. Individual Kethvar soldiers had limited ability to think for themselves or adapt to changing situations. This was both their strength and their weakness. Admiral Hayes pushed his rescue fleet even harder toward the Veltar position. His ships suffered stress fractures and engine failures from the brutal pace, but no one complained. Every human crew member understood that they were racing to prevent genocide. The Admiral's daily broadcasts reminded them that somewhere in the darkness ahead, Jake Morrison waited with people who had saved him when they owed him nothing. Jake's own broadcast to the approaching fleet revealed the amazing courage of the Veltar refugees. Despite facing extinction, they refused to abandon their principles of nonviolence and compassion. Instead of preparing to fight, they focused on preserving their cultural knowledge and protecting their children. They faced death with dignity that inspired humans across the galaxy. Captain Bennett's scouts reported that other species were also moving toward the battle zone. The crystalline Zirtai had mobilized their energy web ships. The aquatic Myrdal sent their biovessels that could heal battle damage in real time. Word of humanity's rescue mission had spread throughout the galaxy and inspired others to take action against Kethvar tyranny. But all these potential allies were still days away from the Veltar position. Jake knew that when the Kethvar hunters arrived, he would face them with only the refugee fleet's improvised defenses and his own determination to repay the kindness that saved his life. The odds were hopeless, but he had learned from the Veltar that some things mattered more than survival. Elder Wingsong Kethara spent her final hours teaching Jake the most sacred songs of her people. She wanted him to remember their culture even if their ships were destroyed and their voices silenced forever. Jake promised her that humanity would carry Veltar wisdom to every corner of the galaxy. Their kindness would create ripples that would outlast any empire built on conquest and fear. The Kethvar hunter fleet dropped out of jump space exactly when long-range sensors predicted they would. 123 warships faced the Veltar refugee fleet of 47 civilian vessels, hidden among asteroids and space debris. The aliens began their attack immediately without offering surrender terms. They had come to commit genocide, and nothing would deter them from their purpose. Jake Morrison activated the defensive network he had built with Veltar engineers over the past weeks. Ancient refugee ships suddenly revealed hidden weapons and shield emitters. The asteroid field itself became a weapon, as explosions created debris storms that confused enemy sensors. For the first time in months, the Veltar were not running, but standing their ground. Flight singer Zarathek led her scout ships in impossible maneuvers through the asteroid maze. Her knowledge of stellar phenomena combined with human tactical doctrine to create a fighting style the galaxy had never seen. Behind her, the refugee fleet prepared to show the Kethvar that wisdom and courage could stand against any darkness. The Kethvar hunter fleet attacked with the mechanical precision of a hive mind that had crushed dozens of civilizations. Their warships moved in perfect formation as energy weapons lit up the asteroid field with deadly fire. But Jake Morrison had spent weeks learning that the greatest strength could also be the greatest weakness. The aliens' rigid thinking made them predictable to those who understood how to use that against them. Jake activated the first phase of his defensive plan as Kethvar ships entered the asteroid maze. Hidden explosive charges detonated throughout the field, creating clouds of metallic debris that confused enemy sensors and disrupted their targeting systems. The hunter fleet found itself flying blind through a storm of spinning rock and metal fragments that tore at their hull plating. Flight singer Zarathek led her squadron of Veltar scout ships through passages between the asteroids that her people had mapped over centuries of space travel. Her vessels appeared and disappeared like ghosts as they struck at isolated Kethvar ships with improvised weapons. Mining lasers designed to cut rock sliced through alien armor, while makeshift missiles fashioned from ore containers exploded against enemy shields. The refugee fleet split into 7 groups and scattered in different directions as if panicking under the attack. The Kethvar commanders fell for the deception exactly as Jake hoped they would. The hunter fleet divided its forces to pursue each group of fleeing refugees. This was the moment Jake had been preparing for since the first day he learned about human military tactics from his academy instructors. Each Veltar group led their pursuers into carefully prepared killing zones where the asteroids themselves became weapons. Solar wind patterns that Elder Wingsong Kethara had studied for decades focused concentrated radiation on Kethvar ships. Magnetic field generators normally used for mining operations created electromagnetic pulses that disabled alien electronics. Ancient Veltar knowledge combined with human ingenuity to turn the entire star system into a battlefield. One Kethvar squadron found itself trapped in a box canyon of asteroids where Veltar ships had positioned mirror arrays that focused the system star into a deadly beam. The alien vessels tried to retreat but found their escape route blocked by refugee ships that sacrificed their own safety to maintain the trap. 3 enemy warships were destroyed before the others could break free. Another group of hunters pursued Veltar refugees into what appeared to be open space, but was actually a carefully prepared minefield. Cargo containers disguised as space debris exploded in sequence, creating a chain reaction that crippled 5 Kethvar vessels. The survivors found themselves under attack from refugee ships that emerged from hiding places among the metallic clouds left by the explosions. Jake coordinated the battle from the bridge of Elder Wingsong Kethara's flagship, while the ancient Veltar leader used her deep knowledge of space phenomena to predict enemy movements. Together, They created a tactical symphony that used every natural force in the system as an instrument of war. But they both knew this desperate gamble could not last forever against such overwhelming numbers. The HFY adapted slowly to the unexpected resistance, but their numbers eventually began to tell. Veltar ships were destroyed one by one as their improvised weapons failed, and their ancient hulls succumbed to enemy fire. The refugee children were evacuated to the most protected vessels, while their parents continued fighting with quiet courage. That amazed even Jake. Captain Ryan Bennett's scout squadron arrived in the middle of the battle and immediately joined the fight against the HFY hunters. 12 human ships added their firepower to the struggle, but even they could not change the basic mathematics of the situation. The defenders were still outnumbered more than 2 to 1 and running out of ammunition for their makeshift weapons. Flight singer Zarathek's ship took a direct hit from HFY plasma cannons and began losing atmosphere. Jake watched helplessly as his closest friend among the Veltar fought to keep her vessel operational, while her crew worked to seal hull breaches. She refused evacuation and continued leading her squadron through increasingly dangerous maneuvers that held the enemy. At bay, Elder Wingsong Kethara made the decision that saved her people's future, even as it doomed many in the present. She ordered the ships carrying Veltar children and cultural archives to break away from the battle and flee toward the approaching human rescue fleet. The remaining vessels would hold their positions and buy time for the next generation to escape. Jake argued against the plan, but the elder's wisdom prevailed. She reminded him that cultures survived not through individual heroism, but through the preservation of knowledge and hope. If the children lived, then Veltar civilization would continue, somewhere else among the stars. If they all died together, then the galaxy would lose something irreplaceable forever. The evacuation ships departed under cover of a desperate attack led by Jake and the remaining Veltar warriors. They drew HFY attention away from the fleeing refugees by striking directly at the enemy flagship in a move so bold it shocked even the hive-minded aliens. The attack succeeded in creating chaos among the hunter fleet, but cost them their last reserves of ammunition and shielding. HFY reinforcements arrived just as the defenders' situation became hopeless. 50 fresh enemy warships dropped out of jump space to join the battle against the exhausted Veltar survivors. The aliens began their final assault with overwhelming firepower that no amount of courage or cleverness could resist. Jake prepared to die alongside the people who had saved him when they owed him nothing. That was when new contacts appeared on every sensor screen in the system. Admiral Samuel Hayes led the human rescue fleet out of jump space with perfect timing that caught the HFY force between two fires. But humanity had not come alone. Other species who remembered their own encounters with HFY aggression had joined the rescue mission. The crystalline Jirtai brought their energy web technology that could disable entire squadrons of enemy ships. The aquatic Murdahl arrived with biovessels that immediately began healing damaged Veltar ships with living hull patches. A dozen other civilizations had answered humanity's call to stand against tyranny and genocide. Admiral Hayes sent a direct transmission to Jake Morrison on a frequency only humans would recognize. His words carried across the battlefield with the authority of Earth itself behind them. He told Jake that humanity always kept its promises and that no one would be left behind. The rescue fleet had come to take everyone home. Jake felt tears on his cheeks as he realized the impossible had become reality. The kindness the Veltar had shown him was returning multiplied beyond anything he could have imagined. Species from across the galaxy had united to save refugees they had never met, simply because it was right. Elder Wingsong Kethara had been correct about kindness creating ripples through the universe. The final battle was about to begin, but now the odds had changed completely. The HFY found themselves facing not helpless refugees, but a coalition of free species united in their determination to protect the innocent. Today would mark the beginning of something new in the galaxy. Today, tyranny would learn that some things were worth fighting for. The battle for the Veltar refugees became the moment when everything changed in the galaxy. Admiral Samuel Hayes led the human rescue fleet into combat with tactical precision that caught the HFY hunter force completely off guard. The aliens had expected to finish destroying helpless civilians, but instead found themselves trapped between refugee defenders and the largest coalition fleet in recorded history. Jake Morrison watched from Elder Wingsong Cathara's damaged flagship, as human warships engaged Keithvar vessels with weapons designed specifically for this fight. Dr. Amy Collins had studied every piece of intelligence about alien technology and transmitted weaknesses to the fleet. Human missiles struck at precise points where Kethvar shields were weakest, while energy weapons targeted their command nodes. The crystalline Zyrtai deployed their energy web technology in patterns that disabled entire squadrons of enemy ships. Their vessels looked like living jewels as they wove streams of pure force between Kethvar warships. The aliens found their weapons powerless and their engines dead as the energy webs drained power from every system they touched. Captain Ryan Bennett's scout squadron coordinated with Veltar survivors to guide the larger Allied ships through the asteroid field. The refugees who had fought so desperately now served as pathfinders for their rescuers. Flight singer Zara Thek ignored her ship's damage to lead human destroyers through passages only Veltar navigators could safely traverse. The aquatic Myrdal proved that their bioships were not just transport vessels, but living weapons of incredible power. Their organic hulls absorbed Kethvar energy blasts and converted the power into healing streams that repaired damaged Allied vessels. Jake watched in amazement as Veltar ships grew new hull plating from living metal, while Myrdal healers sang in frequencies that resonated through space itself. Other species joined the battle with technologies that demonstrated the galaxy's incredible diversity. The gas giant dwellers called Normek brought gravity manipulation devices that crushed Keithvar ships like empty cans. The silicon-based Queltar used their natural ability to interface with computer systems to turn alien weapons against their own vessels. The Kethvar hive mind that had conquered so many worlds found itself facing something it could not understand or predict. Every species fought differently using unique abilities and tactics that the rigid alien intelligence had never encountered. The Hunter fleet's coordination broke down as individual commanders tried to respond to threats they had no experience fighting. Admiral Hayes established communication with Jake Morrison and Elder Wingsong Cathara to coordinate the final phase of the battle. The human commander asked for Veltar guidance in herding the remaining Kethvar ships into a containment zone where they could be captured rather than destroyed. Even in victory, the Allies wanted to minimize unnecessary death. Jake translated the Admiral's request to Elder Wingsong Cathara, who responded with typical Veltar wisdom. She suggested using the asteroid field's natural gravitational patterns to create a trap that would disable enemy ships without destroying them. The Kethvar might be genocidal conquerors, but they were still thinking beings who deserved a chance to change their ways. The containment operation required perfect coordination between dozens of species with completely different fighting styles and technologies. Human tactical doctrine provided the framework, while Veltar space knowledge guided the execution. Other species contributed their unique abilities to create a battle plan that no single civilization could have developed alone. Flight singer Zara Thek led the final maneuver that trapped the surviving Kethvar ships in a gravitational pocket created by the combined efforts of the Allied fleet. Her damaged scout ship barely held together as she guided enemy vessels into position with the skill of someone who had grown up among the stars. When the trap closed, she had proven that courage came in many forms. The remaining Keithvar commander faced a choice that no hive-minded being had ever confronted. Surrender meant acknowledging that other forms of life had value and deserved to exist. For a species that defined itself through conquest and domination, this was almost impossible to comprehend. But faced with certain destruction, the alien chose survival over ideology. Commander Lisa Parker led the evacuation effort that followed the battle. Human hospital ships and colony transports worked alongside Veltar civilian vessels to rescue survivors from damaged ships on both sides. Even Kethvar wounded received medical attention from species they had tried to destroy. The galaxy was learning a new way to end conflicts. Dr. Amy Collins began the enormous task of documenting Veltar culture and knowledge before any more of it could be lost. She worked directly with Elder Wingsong Cathara to preserve songs and stories that contained thousands of years of accumulated wisdom. The old Veltar leader insisted that this knowledge belonged to all thinking beings, rather than just her own people. Jake Morrison found himself appointed as the first human ambassador to the Veltar people and coordinator of the new Galactic Rescue Initiative. His office aboard Admiral Hayes's flagship became the center of communication between dozens of species who had discovered they could work together for the common good. The Coalition fleet established temporary bases in the system, while permanent homes were found for the Veltar refugees. Every member species offered to share their worlds with the survivors. The Veltar would never be homeless again because they had taught the galaxy what it meant to choose kindness over cruelty. Elder Wing Song Kethara lived to see her people safe among friends who valued their wisdom and peaceful ways. In her final conversation with Jake, she told him that saving him had been the most important decision her people ever made. Through one human, they had connected with an entire galaxy of potential allies who shared their values. Flight singer Zarathek recovered from her injuries and became the first Veltar officer to serve aboard a human warship. Her knowledge of space phenomena and her tactical brilliance made her invaluable in planning future operations against Kethvar forces. But more importantly, her presence reminded everyone that strength and gentleness could exist in the same person. Turko. Kethvar Empire did not collapse immediately, but its expansion stopped as more species joined the growing alliance. The hive-minded aliens found themselves facing coordinated resistance wherever they tried to conquer new worlds. For the first time in their history, they had to consider that their way might not be the only way. Captain Ryan Bennett established the first joint military academy, where officers from every allied species could learn to fight together. Human tactics combined with Veltar wisdom and technologies from dozens of worlds created new approaches to conflict that emphasized protection over conquest. Jake Morrison's final report to Earth described how saving one group of refugees had transformed the entire galaxy. The Galactic Rescue Initiative grew into an alliance of over 50 species united by the principle that kindness was not weakness, but the foundation of true civilization. The Veltar had been right about kindness creating endless ripples through the universe. The war against tyranny was far from over, but now it was being fought by beings who understood what they were defending. Somewhere in space, other refugees waited for rescue and other civilizations faced extinction. But they would not face these dangers alone, because the galaxy had learned what humans and Veltar discovered together. When someone saves one of yours, you save all of theirs, and in doing so, you save yourself.